okay, women are doing more of the work, we're taking on more of the mental load. But I am hearing so many men in the sessions I'm having here in Munich, where we live in Germany, say, I don't necessarily want it to be this way. I don't know how to help. I don't know what you just tell me, like, can you just help out? Can you do more? I need you to do more. And I've just been at work, or you've been at work too, and do more. What does that mean?
You're listening to the Mindful Mama podcast, episode number 210, talking to Katie Rössler about how to make a more equal partnership. Welcome to the Mindful Mama podcast. Here it's about becoming a less irritable, more joyful parent. At Mindful Mama, we know that you cannot give what you do not have, and when you have calm and peace within, then you can give it to your children. I'm your host, Hunter Clark-Field's Mindful Mama mentor. I help smart, thoughtful parents stay calm so they can have strong, connected relationships with their children. I've been practicing mindfulness for over 20 years. I'm the creator of the Mindful Parenting membership, and I'm the author of Raising Good Humans, a mindful guide to breaking the cycle of reactive parenting and raising kind, confident kids. Welcome back to this Mindful Mama podcast episode, my friend. I am so glad that you are here. In just a moment, I'm going to be sitting down with Katie Rössler, who is a wife, mom to 2 girls, and licensed couples counselor. And she helps couples build healthier relationships after kids. So this is going to be a great conversation. If you listen to my episode with Darcy Lockerman, this is kind of like part 2 to this conversation. We'd really talk about how to have these discussions with our partners, what to do next, right? When we just really realize that things aren't, maybe we're falling into old gender stereotypical patterns after our children are born. But the problem with that, right, is that it leads to that stay-at-home parent, or most usually mom, right, to feel burnt out and overwhelmed. And Katie's going to help us with that. So I want you to listen for some important takeaways. 1, we fall into old patterns because we are not questioning them. And I think this episode will help you do that. Also, how to talk to your partner when you want to change things. So this is really a very valuable, useful how-to kind of episode. And then number 3, I want you to think about writing down exactly what it is you need help with. So we really get into the nitty-gritty here. And I think you're going to find this incredibly valuable, as I did. Before we dive in, I want to let you know that there's a couple important things coming up. I still have space in the Mindful Mama Spring Retreat. I would love for you to join me on March 21st in Philadelphia. And it's so cool. People are flying in from Seattle and from Illinois. And it is a day-long retreat where we are going to be doing some meditation, some gentle yoga with my favorite yoga teacher, and working on communication skills and really just diving deep and giving yourself a day to also have a sense of deep rest and deep community. This piece about connecting with other moms who are going through what you're going through, it feels so good to have this deep connection and to have this really real sense in the body that you are not alone. So I invite you to get one of the last spots in the retreat. It's going to be an amazing day. I promise you'll remember it forever. And I will be happy to say hello, and we will have a hug in person. It'll be so nice. So that's at mindfulmamamentor.com/retreat. And also happening right very soon is the Unmartyr Yourself training. So that is, if you are somewhere in the world or you can't make it to the retreat, anyone can join the online Unmartyr Yourself training, and it goes really well along with what we're talking about today with Katie. And we talk even a little more about how to talk to our partners, as well as other things. And I kind of walk you through step by step some challenges to help you take some positive steps to get out of that crazy, detrimental mommy martyr mindset. So you can join that at mindfulmamamentor.com/unmartyr. That's UNMARTYR. Kind of a funky spelling, I know. UNMARTYR. So I hope I will see you there. And now, on to this episode. Katie, thanks so much for coming on the Mindful Mama podcast.
Thank you, Hunter. I am super excited about this.
I am so excited about this too. And you reached out to me after the wonderful episode about equality at home with Darcy Lockerman, which I should have looked up the number before I mentioned that. Sorry, dear listener. But I am so excited to talk to you and continue this conversation in a much more nuanced and varied way. And I'm really so excited about that. And you and I are going to talk about how to have these difficult conversations, this is what I like, this how to, right? Like, we know we want more equality at home. How do we get into these conversations? But before we dive into that, I'm just kind of curious for you, how did you become fascinated with this idea? I mean, sometimes I think back to like kind of my own childhood and I think like, how did I become a feminist? Like my father, my mom does all the stuff. Like, how did they raise me to be sort of this uppity feminist? Like, I don't understand how that happened. So just for you, how did you become interested in this whole idea?
Well, so first, I'm a licensed professional counselor. So I do couples therapy for over 10 years now. And I had started prior even to that, always being that feminist mindset. And I had a dad who was very empowering of like, you should be an engineer, get in the math world. Like that was his mindset of like, this is where the opportunities are for women and you could be on the cutting edge. And then I had a mom who was a stay-at-home mom. We were a military family and she was very nurturing and empowering as well, like one of my biggest cheerleaders. And she was the same mindset. You can do whatever you want. It didn't need to be math or technology, but like you can do whatever you want and you can be whatever you want. So I like to think of it not so much as that I became sort of this feminist because I had a 4.5-year younger brother, but we became, in a sense, I like to call it genderist. Like we can do what we want. We all have choices. We all matter, and that not one is necessarily stronger than the other. I've since learned that here in Europe, the term feminist means genderist as well, as I would say. But growing up in North America, I think when we say feminist, we tend to think women's rights and not the equal rights of both sides, no matter what their sexual preferences, what their culture is, what their, those types of things. So that's something that I grew up seeing a dad who on the weekends was helping out in the house. And I saw a mom who would do some of the things that maybe traditionally a man might do. Like there was just this comfortability and fluidity that helped me see it doesn't have to look one way. And from that, so my bachelor's is in psychology with a certificate in women's studies because I wanted to start to really explore the feminist movement. Like at that time, I was like, yes, and see why traditional roles occurred. What was going on? What was the thinking historically? Why were women fighting the way they were for their rights? Like you come into this world and you kind of go like, what? Like we only get the tip of the iceberg. Where's the like what's been going on?
Yeah. Why is it like this? I remember thinking that like, I looking at growing up as a kid in the 80s, like looking around at I feel like that in the 80s, there were so many, like there were all these like videos of like women in bikinis on cars. And there was just so many images of like tan women in string bikinis on cars, like everywhere. And just wondering like, why? Like what?
Right. Yes. Yeah, completely. Yeah. So it's kind of this like exploring your own culture, exploring why things are the way they are. And then when I became a marriage and family therapist and really focused on couples, I got to see firsthand kind of why those things were happening. And I learned it largely was because the quote, right conversations weren't happening. People were falling into old patterns that they grew up with because that couple didn't question it, because that's what they grew up with. And there wasn't this, hey, okay, women are doing more of the work. We're taking on more of the mental load. But I'm seeing that now, which is a big reason why I shared this out to you prior to this recording. But I think I am hearing so many men. There's a 2.0 now. I'm having this conversation in Munich, where we live in Germany, say, I don't necessarily want it to be this way. I just don't I don't know how to help. I don't know what you just tell me, like, can you just help out? Can you do more? I need you to do more. And I've just been at work, or you've been at work too, and do more. What does that mean? I'm not trained to already see the projects or know necessarily what needs to get done.
I guess so. Yeah. And then women, like, we feel like, you're exhausted. You just want help. And you also don't want to have to like explain it. Like, come on, that's like a whole
Right.
other, like being the CEO of the house is like a whole other job.
Yeah, totally. I like to call it chief household officer. So and I believe that we should share that job.
Yeah.
It's not that it has to be equal, but a discussion needs to happen about what that workload will look like, what areas will be shared. And I break up a chief household officer into like the leader side and the manager side. And the leader is like, think of it like the planner of, what's our week going to look like, the meal plan. So anything that's like proactively setting the tone for the family to be successful in that day, the week, month, year. And then the manager, which is sometimes us as well, ends up doing it and going, hey, that plan didn't work out. Like, I know we planned for that, but that's not realistic with 3 kids. So let's change this up. So we have 2 sides to this job. And I believe if we come together with our partners, if we are fortunate enough to have our partners living home with us and have a healthy relationship, that we can say, let's do this together. And maybe if you're in a situation, let's say your husband works full time and maybe you as the mom work full time as well. Let's do that dynamic. Then here you typically, instead of driving a car, you take an S-Bahn or a train. So that is potentially 30 minutes to be on your computer and meal plan for the week. And so that, and either of you can do that. It doesn't mean one has to do it, because typically she is the woman or the one who typically cooks. The person who leads by creating the plan doesn't have to necessarily cook, but maybe really good at organizing, strategizing, those types of things. So looking at our strengths and then negotiating the things we don't enjoy doing, I think is important.
Yeah. I mean, so kind of what I'm hearing from you is that we have to take time to step out of the day-to-day, like just get it all done, to step back and kind of work on our marriage, work on our partnership, and be strategic about it. And I love this idea of looking at our strengths and seeing what we like to do and things like that. I imagine that ideally, these are conversations that we might all have before we have kids, right? Like, kind of ideally, these conversations happen before you have kids.
I would say yes, but it's theory versus practice. Sometimes we go, okay, this is the plan. I always think of it like a birth plan. Like, this is how, I want to have it go. And then when you're there, you're like, oh, that didn't work. Like maybe so it's talking about it before children and then regularly going, is this working? How do we adapt? I like to think of it like your home's a business, kind of running it. You don't talk to each other necessarily like, your business partners, but like, does that system work? Where are we putting the mail? Why are we putting it there? How do we make sure it doesn't stay there? Like looking at that kind of thing. Bedtime routine. How's that working out? But revisiting who does what and why, not that it just falls on someone's shoulders because we didn't talk about it.
So let's imagine that the listener has kind of just had a baby. You're like, you're 6 weeks to a year postpartum, and you're realizing, whether you're the father or the mother, you're realizing, oh my goodness, we didn't have these conversations, and we are kind of just falling back into these gendered patterns of the roles. How do you suggest we start having these conversations? How do we open these conversations? What kind of intention do we want to go into them with? And what are some things that we should be discussing that we don't realize?
So I was there 5 years ago. I have a 5.5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and that's completely what happened to us. I said, okay, I left my private practice to be a stay-at-home mom, and I said, okay, I'm going to do this. My mom did it. This is what I'm going to do. And I didn't realize the job I was signing up for. Like I didn't understand what all it would mean because you can't till you're there. And so it was a lot of tears. It was a lot of arguing because I did not know how to voice it without it coming across like, you don't do enough, you don't care. And what husband wants to hear that they are not like providing or helping or like, what do you need me to do? And so what ends up happening is it becomes this emotional battle. So I think the key thing is and this could be reversed because I've worked with stay-at-home dads and they have the same struggles. Like you don't help out and you come home and you just want to relax because you've been at work all day. And I'm like, I've heard this before and I've felt it before. But sit down and write down what it is exactly you need help with.
Stay tuned for more Mindful Mama podcast right after this break. This episode is sponsored by Care Of. It is a very cool wellness brand. It really makes it easy to maintain your health goals with a customized vitamin plan that helps you feel your best and supports you long term. So what's really exciting about care.com is that I went and took their amazing online quiz, and it's this short online quiz, and you answer some questions about your diet, health goals, lifestyle, etc. And what was interesting for me as I did this was that it discerned that where I live, where I'm not getting enough vitamin D, and Care Of, it recommended the vitamins that I had already figured out that I really need through lots of like hard work to figure this out. I had figured out that I needed some magnesium and vitamin D, and Care Of figured that out for me so easily. So if you need some help to figure these things out, this online quiz is a must. It's, the vitamin aisle is so confusing. I actually had a client go in and was so overwhelmed by the vitamin aisle that she left completely without getting anything. So you answer easy questions like, how much sleep do you get? How often do you work out? Do you follow any special diets, etc.? And then you just follow their expert recommendations and you can adjust your pack at any time. So they send you an individual little pack for daily for you to take. So it makes it so easy. And it's really this wonderful quality. It's really focused on quality, science, and research that goes into their products. They have yummy protein powders made of real ingredients you can recognize, like organic cocoa and pink Himalayan sea salt. And the individual eco-friendly packs are made of compostable films, and there's tons of info on how to compost them on Care Of's site. For a very special offer for Mindful Mama podcast listeners, you can get 50% off your first Care Of order. You go to takecareof.com and enter the code HUNTER50. So that's for 50% off of your first Care Of order. You go to takecareof.com and enter the code HUNTER50. I know that you're going to love this product, and it makes it so easy, and it makes it so that we finally can keep that resolution of making 2020 the year we prioritize ourselves and commit to staying on top of your health. That's 50% off your first Care Of order, which are very reasonably priced anyway, actually. So you go to takecareof.com and enter the code HUNTER50.
And my husband and I just this last summer sat down and actually created what are all the jobs that have to be done in our home and in our family. Like at this age, like birthday party present purchasing, or the kids going to a birthday party. Who does that?
Mm-hmm.
Or his family's events. Who buys those gifts? Or my family's events. Who buys those gifts? All of it. And it seems like it would be this huge list. And I honestly probably should create a template. You'll come out with a pretty large list of things that need to be the cars, the garden, like all the different things, the house. And then you can go, okay, what do you want to do? Well, what do you want to do? And you really start to map it all out. Now, my husband works full time. I work from home. And then I have the kids starting at about 1:45 2 p.m. to the rest of the day. So in the morning is my time to work. And in the afternoon, I know I have that time. I can fold clothes. I love teaching my girls to be a part of that process, or we can, go play in the garden, whatever it is. But I don't have all day long to do household chores, and my husband knows this. So we had to sit down and say, okay, when you come home, what does it make sense for you to do? Maybe you take the kids and entertain them so then I can go get this done, or vice versa. Like I finally play with the kids and relax, and you take care of it. For me, cooking is so calming. Meal planning, I like to do with him. And that was something that for the longest time, I would just be like, what do you want to eat? Well, what do well, is there something in specific versus like, no, you're going to meal plan with me. Let's do this together. And when it's what do you feel like having, or where do you want to go on vacation? Instead of like, let's partner and discuss this together, it can become a little like when they go, I don't know. It's like, you're not helping. I'm at the same place I was before.
Well, I like what you just said, like, let's partner and discuss this together. And, and maybe even very much explicitly saying that, when you say you decide or you take the reins on this, it explaining explicitly that puts responsibility on your shoulders, and that you're asking for contribution and asking for partnering with it. So I love the using the word partner as a verb there to discuss this together. You talked about listing out all the jobs. It's fascinating because that's what in mindful parenting, is one of it came up recently, talking about how to, a lot of what you're saying, we talk about win-win problem solving, kind of how to do that and how to kind of make explicit. And in my family, we did this just a few months ago, where we wrote down all the things that we do in the house, all the chores that happen. And actually we cut them out, all the little pieces of paper. And then we made a big grid of like, mommy and daddy and Maggie and Sora. And we said, okay, look, visually, here are all the things that we are doing. What would you like to take on? Because we're doing sort of too much. And so I think having that conversation in a really explicit way, but what I'm also hearing you say is this is not a blameful way, like you're not helping me enough. It's just like, I am, so how would you suggest we communicate if the listener is feeling overwhelmed, and feeling like maybe they've fallen into doing all the work because they're staying home as the main caregiver, and they haven't had this conversation? How can we initiate the conversation in a way that's not blameful, in a way where our partner's going to listen to us and want to sit down with us and do this? Okay, what exactly do you need help? And writing down the jobs and all those things. So how can we start that conversation in the first place?
So this is a big premise of why I'm writing the book, Making Our Home. I think you can sit down and say, honey, I really want to create this home to be ours. And so that means we got to start talking about like the traditions we do with our kids, what's important to us, and what goes on in our home, how we create it to be the home that we want. And I love when couples start with a mission statement. What is our family mission statement? And then from there, go, okay, so how do we create, like, let's say one of parts of your mission statement is to be open and welcoming to friends or family, or, always there for people, or whatever it might be. Then you probably want a home that is inviting to people and comfortable. And then that means kind of like keeping it clean and being able to allow that kind of. And so then who does that fall on? Okay, well, let's talk about what that means. Okay, keeping it clean and organized. And if your kids are of age, 100% get them involved on that. But if they're babies, if they're younger, okay, so I'm home 7 hours of the working day, in quotations, and you're home 2 of it, or something like that. Okay, so it makes sense that I'm going to do these things. So when you're home, will you take care of these things? And it's almost like you could even Excel spreadsheet it with the times of day, and almost like your own little calendar, and go like, okay, it makes sense because I have these many hours I am here in a week that I will do these particular jobs, and you are here for these many hours. And so it's the same if you were working with again, at a business, and you were looking at the different jobs that need to be done and delegating who does what, you would look at like, what time do you have to do this? And what does that look like and stuff? It just makes sense to do it that way. And if you've got a part-time worker and you've got a full-time worker, you probably wouldn't give the part-time worker like 90% of the project, or it won't get done.
Yeah.
Or it won't get done fast. And so, or they'll burn out. So looking at it that way. But I think the biggest thing is that if you are the person who is home the most, which is typically the person who's going to initiate this conversation, let's be honest, it's remembering that your desire isn't to point the finger and blame them and tell them they're not enough or they're not doing enough. It's to say, I want to create our home. And that's an hour. That's not me tell you what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm already a mom to like these little beings, and you don't desire for me to be your mom, and we want like a healthy relationship. So nagging, bothering, whining, complain, all these things that you quote hear me doing, a lot of times our partners tend to tell like, you just always bug me about this. You don't want me to do that anymore, and I don't want to either. So let's make our home. And that might take a couple weekends of mapping it all out. But at the end of it, you have, okay, this is what we're going to do, and this is who's doing what. And at least at the end of it, you'll feel empowered to know why you're doing what you're doing, and not just because it fell on your shoulders.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. But it's interesting, Katie, because as I hear you talk about it and you speak about it so like calmly and methodically, and I'm picturing this like the stay-at-home caregiver, is probably totally at loose ends because they are maybe taking all the things on. And they do want, they don't want to blame, and they do want it to be our home. They don't want to tell the partner what to do, but there's some dissatisfaction. So, how can we skillfully express that dissatisfaction with the status quo, or even, if this, the old habits come return and come back after maybe a nice kind of jumpstart too. So I guess
like a good week, and then
right. Yeah.
Yes, which totally makes sense, because many times we're conditioned in the homes that we grew up in of how something looks. And then if we've kind of done it that way in our own current home for years, then it is hard to break that habit, isn't it? It's hard to think differently about it. So it's the same as you would do in parenting. You'd have reminders, bright color sticky note, whatever it needs to be. We need that too to change those habits. I think that's really important.
Sticky notes are like the best habit changing.
I have a whole new pack of bright ones right here because I just love them. So, but I think the mom who's at her wit's end, she's emotional. It's gotten so far that she just feels taken advantage of, burnout, exhausted, and not seen or heard by her partner. Like, how would you let me get to this level kind of thing? There's two things I would suggest. One, when it's time to have the talk, have that piece of paper in front of you that like, let's write this out together, because that keeps us logical versus the emotional, like, and then you didn't do this. And then why didn't you think of this? You just stepped over the toys to lay down on the couch. Why did you do that? Like we get into that spiral. So if we have a piece of paper that says like, hey, at the end of the day, the toys are out and I'm still putting the kids to bed and you're laying on the couch. How about we change that up and, so that we both have time at the end of the day to enjoy together. So while I'm putting the kids to bed, you're putting away the toys, then you can rest as much as you want after, whatever it might be. Like it's what makes logical sense. But you've got to get all that emotion out, that hurt. And honestly, if we lead with that, they're not going to listen. It's the same when we lead in parenting with like all that emotion, and then we want to talk them to death over it. They're gone. They're not listening. So when you come to your partner, it's writing that down. It took me sitting down and figuring out, why do I feel this way? And understanding it was no one's fault. Often when we feel upset and burn out and frustrated, we point the finger.
It's very natural human tendency.
Yes. Who did this to me? They need to pay. And to say, man, we are so conditioned this way. Oh, his mom used to do this, or whatever. Like but have that safe friend who isn't going to just go on the complaining rant with you. Like, oh, and yeah, mine does this, but to go, yeah, how are we can like talk about it in a way that has an end
Mm-hmm.
and to go like, I don't want to be conditioned this way anymore. And I don't want him to be conditioned this way. So let's start to have our conversations. But you've got to get out the emotions some way, or it comes out naturally when we sit down and talk. For my husband and I, over 5 years ago, I remember that conversation very vividly of me crying and being like, this, I can't do this. And then even most recently, we had another one where I was like, okay, I'm feeling again like things are falling on my shoulders because his work was starting to get even more stressful. So naturally, when you come home after a day at work, you want respite, relaxation. You don't want more work.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to remind him, you are a co-parent. This is our home. It cannot fall all on me just because you go through stressful times. Or you need to talk with me like, hey, the next week's going to be really bad. I may not be as aware.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just about that open communication, because I have no problem picking up from my husband when he's struggling. And that needs to be vice versa too. And it is for us, but it took a lot of conversations of, you know, how like when you've had a really bad week and I'm like, honey, just go sit down. Do you want some tea? I'll like,
Mm-hmm.
I need that on my bad days too.
Yeah, and let's recognize that raising children, like being, if you're a person,
Yeah,
being with multiple human beings under the age of 4 and 5 for multiple hours of a day is crazy making. It's
totally.
totally crazy making and loud and crazy. And you may not be able to do anything but be with those human beings and keep them kind of safe and fed
Yes.
and not lose your mind, right? Maybe just a little bit
Yes.
of losing your mind in there. And that is a valuable job that is contributing enormously. 10 years ago, I had two friends who, when my kids were littler, I have two friends who were both engineers, and they met.
Hmm.
And the mom decided to stay home with the kids, and so she had a garden outside and took care of the house and did a lot of the cooking and a lot of the things, right? Did a lot of the normal sort of like traditional gender roles. But what they did, which I thought was really interesting, being engineers that they are, is they sat down and calculated exactly how much it would cost to hire out for all the things that she was doing in the house. And they calculated that she was bringing in 10 years ago at least $60,000 worth of income
Oh,
with
100%.
with
Yes.
everything that she was doing. And so I think that
Yes.
is so, like, there's a piece in here about that we have to kind of check ourselves about our conditioning to undervalue the work of
Yeah.
raising children and the work of taking care of a home, because that is real work, and the
Yes.
person who is doing that does deserve breaks and does deserve
Yeah.
time away and does deserve, you know, all the things that the person working outside of the home needs as well.
Yes, completely. I totally agree. And for those of us who went to university and got this degree and then we choose, or because of life situation we end up staying at home, you feel like you like are just sitting on it. Like, why did I spend all that money? Like, why did I do this? I had I have a program from stay-at-home mom to chief household officer, and one of the women in it 2 years ago now was from Pakistan, and she said, we have a saying in my country that basically when you become a stay-at-home mom and you went to university is you burn your degree on the stove. And I was like, oh, and I said, but isn't that how some families view women who decide to stay at home and not work?
Mm.
You know, like, well, why did you even get educated? Like, there's this sort of judgment, like, well, that business degree was for nothing. Like, what? And not an understanding of, we go through seasons of our lives where one thing is a little more important than another.
Mhm.
Or a mom who says, I do still want to use that degree, and that's okay too.
Mhm.
And we can afford the childcare. And so more empowerment. But again, it's making our home. It's us deciding together versus it just being well, that's how it should be. That's and that's the importance of sitting down and budgeting together
Mhm.
and not pointing the finger and the blame of like, you're spending too much or da da da. Like, what do we need to be saving? Where do we need to be paying off this, that, whatever?
Mhm.
Hey, you're spending the money on groceries mainly. how much are we spending on average, and what makes sense, instead of, no, you should only spend this much. Like, you work together on those things and really making your home. And part of that's budgeting. Part of that is looking at how to run the home. Part of that is like what traditions you want to have in your home.
All right. All right, cool. So having these conversations, and I can imagine for you, dear listener, you're thinking, this sounds amazing. And part of that conversation may be, there may be that logical part of the conversation, and there may be that emotional part. And we can also do that skillfully. Using I statements. I'm
Yeah.
feeling really overwhelmed. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling frustrated a lot. So can we
Yeah.
have this conversation? I really want it to be us. I really want us to partner together. I think that we have to have the space to acknowledge what is the emotional side of this, and then
Yeah.
step back and say, okay, and let's look at this logically. I love the idea of, like, let's look at this as we are workers in the home, and we have got,
Yeah.
there's a part-time worker and maybe there's a full-time worker. I think that's a great way to do that. And I also think it's funny, like, as you talk about this is a really wonderful motivation, inspiration to simplify and make it so we
Yeah.
have sort of less stuff and not so
Yes.
tight schedules. And, because the more
Yeah.
things we have, the more cars we have, or homes we have, or toys, it's all more care and maintenance that we have to take care of, it, which is like labor. So we have to
Right.
calculate that into.
Right. And be allow for those emotions to happen. And if you find that it gets to the point where it's just exploding and name calling, clearly stop way before then.
Mhm.
But if it gets to that level, I think that is part of planting the seeds of change needs to happen. And when we start to get defensive and fight, it's because we have our own fears, fear of failure. I'm
Mhm.
failing my wife, I'm failing my husband, I'm failing my family. A fear of rejection, I might get left if I ask too much. I might
Mhm.
get left if I don't do it well enough, kind of thing. That fear of shame or guilt, there's something wrong with me that I don't see those messes that she's talking about. And then that fear of punishment, those four big false beliefs that, well, if I do something wrong, I should be punished for it. So I'm going to constantly try to make sure I'm not going to get punished. And when we let those fears fuel us, we get defensive because we're in self-protection mode. So if you find your partner immediately like, well, I did this and da da da, you can just calm them and go, I'm not pointing a finger. I'm saying it's so easy for us to have fallen into this situation because of what we grew up with, or because this is just the culture we grow up in. So let's make it ours, instead of feeling like we're both bitter at each other. I'm so tired of that, because usually both partners are tired of the bitterness, and they're tired of the, stonewalling or the cold shoulder or whatever it might be, or the passive aggressive comments. They want to have a healthy relationship. I haven't had a couple come to me and go, I'm actually okay with when she calls me that name, or, rolls her eyes at me, or I'm okay when he like ignores me and looks at his phone. No, man, I don't think people really desire to have that happen.
Mhm.
So don't run from difficult conversations. We need to be having those, and they plant the seeds to healthier ones each time. And I love what you said about the I statement. And it's, I feel about whatever that thing is, but I need.
Mhm.
That solidifies that statement of I feel. Because if I came to you, Hunter, and was like, I just feel so overwhelmed about like all the things on my list to do, if we were super good friends, you'd be like, oh, what can I do to help? Da, 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 da. But if I said, I need
Mm.
15 minutes of quiet so I can plan this week, can you watch the kids?
Mhm.
Bam, you know what to do. There's no like, I can, how can I help? Or let me just talk you through these emotions. If we lead with our emotions, that's fine, but tell them what you need, and vice versa. I feel so overwhelmed about being told I need to help out more. I need to know specifically what you need me to do.
Mhm.
Like what is it you need? I'll do it. I need to hear specifics, not general. And what I tend to tell people is it's very much like a little kid going into a room that they've just really messed up, and you say, go clean your room. And
Mm.
it's such an overwhelming project.
Mm-hmm.
I need more help.
Mm.
Where do I start? I
Yeah.
need you to clean up the kitchen while I handle the kids who are throwing tantrums right now. Or I need you to handle the kids throwing the tantrum, and I'm going to go clean the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is a part of self-awareness, which is great with the work that you do with your coaching, is to help people to be more self-aware what's going on inside.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond just I feel, but then how do we create action that helps?
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
Yeah, these specific needs. So, say that the listener is listening, and you've been in this pattern for a long time, where maybe you've fallen into those gendered roles, and you at first maybe you're really gung ho about it. You're going to be super mom and do all the things, and now you've got a 7-year-old, and you feel like you want things to change.
Yeah.
Have you worked with clients kind of going through that transition, and how do you advise people to start these kind of conversations when there's been a long
Yeah.
pattern for many years?
Yes. So what I typically do is have the couple sit down and again, I have the wife map out what it is that she knows needs to change, whether it be for her own confidence building, like what it is that's, I just feel like I've not moved forward in my life because I've just been about the 7-year-old or whatever it might be. I need, go back to the I need, what do you need? And to sit down and go, the last 7 years have been challenging and beautiful, like label what the 7 years have been. And I've noticed that we've fallen into some patterns that I'd like to change. And I want to share with you what they are so we can decide together what that will look like. Because here's the thing. Typically what happens is the other partner sometimes has a better deal. Like, yes, they're having to work full time. Yes, that's exhausting. Like I remember this completely exhausting. It has its own stresses. You're dealing with people and their issues, and then you come home and you want to relax. So to have someone say, you've been relaxing when you come home after work for the last 7 years, I'm going to need that to change.
Yeah, I'm not going to
That
be
doesn't happen after one conversation. That doesn't happen after one conversation. So that's going to be a series of conversations of saying, and you might even, especially like we'll use the 7-year-old, it's a great example. Our kid's 7. Can you believe that? Okay. So some things can change in our home. And I think it's time for us to sort of talk about what that would look like. And don't lead with you've had it easy. Well, you haven't really had to do anything anyways. I mean, we'd really like to throw in those like passive aggressive jabs. You just kick up your feet anyway. But to just say, again, lead with the action of movement and progress forward. So now that our kid's 7, I would like to start doing this more. And to me, this is what makes sense, but let's talk about it. What makes sense? You're coming home from work. I wouldn't lead with what do you want to do as much as like what tasks on this list of things, because I won't be able to do those by doing this other thing, volunteering or going back to work or whatever. What of these can you do? What is our 7-year-old, like we talked about chores, what is 7-year-old able to do? And then they'll be thrown off and they'll probably get defensive because, again, when you've been able to relax, why would you want to change that? But more than likely, if they've really been paying attention, they've already seen that their wife wasn't happy. They just don't really want to ask always because they're not quite sure what they're going to get. Is it
don't want to stir the pot?
Like, why would you if she's not telling me, then I don't have to. I think we all like that homeostasis. We all like that balance. So whenever we have to throw it off, it's uncomfortable, but that's what helps us grow. So I think it's just being mindful of when you're further along, it's going to be several conversations. But if you really do frame it as, and I just keep coming back to, because many of the women I work with here, they're like, okay, I'm ready to go back to work. I'm ready to do this volunteer thing that will take me away from the home for hours. That there's hey, I would like this now for me. And I think it would, one, that makes sense, but I would like this for me. And so some of these things will have to change. And I'd rather us decide together than me tell you what you're doing.
That sounds great. And I love the way that you are framing it, Katie, because it's not about asking permission. And sometimes I
Right.
think, especially as women or as the stay-at-home parent or caregiver, there's this perception and this habit energy and this
Yep.
conditioning that we are asking permission to do things from the one who is bringing in more money.
Right.
And that is a mindset that I invite you to, dear listener, to examine. If you have that mindset, are you saying, can I do this thing to your partner? And your partner is not your parent. You don't have to ask your partner permission, but
Right.
it's not about saying in your face, I'm going to do this thing. It's about this middle path of what Katie's describing as how to talk to your partner. This is I the things need to change. I've been feeling this. I'd like to go do this.
Right.
And these are the things that we'll need to figure out how to take care of when I go do this thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you see the same pattern with money mindset issues of that, like, well, I'm not really bringing any money, so I feel really guilty for like spending it on things for me. But is your partner putting you in that box, or have you put it because you feel guilt? And that goes back to that guilt and shame that we start to feel because we're conditioned. If you're bringing home the money, then you get to make that choice. But
Mm-hmm.
it is so empowering when you sit down with your partner and look at a budget together and say, okay, and what's going to be your spending money? What's going to be my spending money? What needs to be saved? And talking about it together, not having one dictate how that will go. But you have to feel solid in your mindset that you're bringing in 60,000 a year because in quotation marks because of the work you're actually doing. And so it is our money.
Mm-hmm.
And that mindset sometimes men struggle with as well.
Mm.
And that can come from, here culturally, you see it where the mother-in-law is like, well, you're not earning anything, so it's not your money. And so you'll get weird, unhealthy dynamics. But you really have to like talk with your partner to see what did they actually believe. Is it our money or do you believe it's yours because you're earning it? And so those can be challenging conversations that I would say talk with a coach, talk with a counselor, because they can get very heated, very emotional. Money tends to really, it creates power, doesn't it, in a hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want that in our home.
This is awesome, Katie. So conversations to have. Sounds like some of them include there's certainly the money conversation. You talked about the management. What are these? So I just want to
Yeah.
give the listener a little bit of a
Yes.
little checklist, like, and for
Yeah,
myself
totally.
too. Like, what are these important conversations that we want to make sure we're having?
Yes. So as chief household officers, you need to be sitting down and looking at what is all the job description? What are all the things that are expected and needed?
Mm-hmm.
And then again, we kind of look at who's full-time, who's part-time, who can do what, da, 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 da. What makes sense. And then you're working together on that. And from there, we can also talk about budgeting. You might find that outsourcing some of these things is actually cheaper when it comes to time, energy, driving around to get the things. I had a friend, it was amazing. She's very good with money. She found that she could outsource her laundry to a service nearby where they come and pick it up. You put it out on the step of your house. They pick it up. They do it. They bring it back. And it saved her money because the water, the electricity, the soap that was being used, because it was a family of 4 and 2 very active sports kids. And she said, and then the time and energy away from her kids to be folding and all this stuff, that it actually was cheaper to hire this company to do it and faster because they weren't letting the pile stay there for the whole week of clothes. They were folding it and getting it back within 24, 48 hours. So, but she said, like, honey, we're going to try this for a month and let's just see if it makes sense. And did the math and really looked at the changes and stuff. And they're really tight with their budget. They're really careful in those things. But she was like, something's got to give because she's a working parent. He was full-time working parent. And it's like, I'm folding laundry all day Saturday.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is ridiculous.
These conversations need to be happen. It was interesting. Like when I remember one year my husband got, he works, has worked the same job for a long time, and he got a raise one year, and it was this like 3% raise. And it's like, okay, this gives us this much money a month.
Yeah.
How can we use this money to best to affect our happiness? And we realized
Yeah.
that we could, the way to use that money to that, he realized, he did the calculation and said, we should be hiring babysitter with this money, because that is what is going to make us happiest, is to put some attention and energy into our relationship, going out and having
Yeah.
time away from our kids. Yes.
Yes.
And it was like, hallelujah, thank you. And we
Yes.
just looked at that and said, okay, I think we need to, sometimes in our culture, we have this idea that we just keep chugging along and we work hard. And if we're not suffering, we're bad
Right.
people. We're not good. Like, you're not as virtuous for some reason. Right. But
Yeah.
we're allowed to have pleasure in our lives. It's good and healthy for us to have pleasure and happiness in our
Yeah.
lives. And we can look at that with our budgeting, what will give us pleasure and more peace and happiness in our lives. All right. Awesome.
Totally.
So money, job descriptions, who's full-time, who's part-time, anything we missed?
I love the idea of becoming sort of a consultant for your home for like a week. How are you using your time? How is your partner using the time? How can it be better used? I like to think of there are certain times a day where it's better to have input and output. It sounds funny, but there's better times to be sitting down and doing the bills or taking care, paperwork, versus the time where you've got more energy to be doing the like cleaning the house, doing the laundry. And if you've got a sleeping child, then you kind of probably already figured this out. That's not as much as you're like, yes, I can get up and like they're asleep and I can start cleaning. If it's noisy, that might wake them up. So that's actually a great time to be doing more of the input, researching healthier meals for the family, whatever it might be, meal planning our week, vacations coming up. I need to go ahead and have my plan laid out.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the kid is awake, depending on your kids, because I know we all have different kids, but maybe baby wearing while you clean or, whatever it might be. But you kind of have to be the consultant of your home to be able to look at it from a outsider's perspective. Like if I was coming in here, what would I have them do differently so that they were able to be more effective with their time and productive and and that helps you see it in your actual situation. Because if I came in and just like, oh, you should do this, 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 and this, you might be like, well, it's not realistic to my family. Like it's not one size fits all. So as your own consultant, you can go, actually, I have that 30-minute block. I hadn't really thought about using it to go do yoga.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or I hadn't really thought about it. Like I end up taking that phone call from that friend who likes to call almost every day and complain about XYZ. And then I just feel awful afterwards. Maybe I don't answer that call and save that 15, 20, maybe an hour of doing something else. When you become a consultant of your own time and your home's time, you start to see things differently. So I would say that's a bonus tip of just like be your own consultant and say how you might shift, again, as a business, how would you shift things? How would you change things? Whose strength is better in this area? And maybe if you shift that work.
And do this with your partner. Don't go do this totally alone. Go do
Right. Don't go be like, you need to do it this way. Like work together, teamwork.
This is so beautiful. I hope that this conversation is sparking some ideas for the listener. I hope that you're saying, I want my partner to be listening to this too. We need to talk about some of these things. And I encourage you, dear listener, to have some of these conversations. We have this one amazing, precious life. We don't have to go through our life frustrated and overwhelmed. It's figure outable. Everything is figure outable. We can look at this frustration. We can start to make changes. And Katie, I think what you've offered today, as far as ways, really concrete, practical ways to start these conversations, to make these changes, is going to be really, really valuable. So thank you so very much for coming on and doing what you're doing and helping couples in this way. If people want to find out more about you, where can they go?
Yeah, I think the best way is Facebook or Instagram, the Chief Household Officer Club.
Okay.
And you can I give lots of tips on productivity and time management, balancing it all.
All right. So there you go. That is certainly not my forte. So go to Katie. Find out those tips. That'll be great. Thank you again. I really appreciate you taking the time. It's been wonderful to connect, and I thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Hunter.
I love how this was a very practical episode, don't you? I hope that this will be something you'll share with your friends, because I think that this is what we need, right? We need to know how to have these conversations, how to take these steps, and this is actually something we're going to be working on in my live training on March 24th. The Unmartyr Yourself training. So that's totally free to sign up. You can go to mindfulmamamentor.com/unmartyr. That's UNMARTYR. And this is an incredible training to help you walk step by step through some of those pieces. And we're going to talk even more about how to talk to our partners as well. So I have some steps for you there. So I hope you'll join us. That's mindfulmamamentor.com/unmartyr. And while I'm on the things that are happening, I want to remind you that there are still spots in the spring retreat. It is so powerful to have an in-person event. I feel so lucky and so blessed to be able to connect with you via this podcast and to, have this place in your life. I think that to be in your ears, it's really an honor and a privilege. But to come into a space in person with other moms who are going through the same things we're going through, and to really connect, to also give ourselves this day of rest, a day of perspective. And we're also going to be talking about communication skills and mindfulness skills. We're going to be doing some gentle yoga and getting a nice little lunch delivered. So I hope you'll join me as soon as you get there. All your needs are taken care of. And it's in Philadelphia, March 21st. It's the Mindful Mama Spring Retreat. That's at mindfulmamamentor.com/retreat. So I hope you will come. I hope you can make it. And if you really are wanting to make it and you're having trouble coming, reach out to me at hunter@mindfulmamamentor.com, and I'll try to make it easier for you. We have some limited scholarships available. And if you want to offer a scholarship, you want to offer you can't make it, but maybe you want another mom to make it, you can also reach out to me and offer a scholarship for a mom who can't make it to because of financial reasons, help that person make it. So this is a community where we're helping each other. So don't feel like you can't come because of financial reasons. So I know that it takes a lot sometimes to get even out of the house. So we want to make it as easy as possible. So I hope you'll come at mindfulmamamentor.com/retreat. And listen, you are still here listening to my voice. And that means, I am so honored about that. I really know that parenting is so hard. Mothering, fathering, everything in between. It brings up so much for us. It's such a deep, intense spiritual journey. Really just this, we know that these relationships, right? Like this relationship with our children, this relationship with our partner, if we have one, these relationships are some of the things that give us the most joy in this life that we have here on earth. So, we're here briefly, it feels like to me, now that I'm 42 and now that my daughter's 13 and my other daughter's 10. I feel like I'm kind of having a little like, oh my God moment. And seeing this is just so brief. I'm turning into one of those grandmas who are like, enjoy every minute. I'm not saying that because I know how annoying that is. But what I'm saying is, I know that this is such an intensive experience. It's so intense when we really become present. It's so intense and it can be so hard. And I want you to know that the intensity and the challenge that you feel is carving space, more space for you to love and more space for your compassion for others. And I know that this is hard, and I just want to say that I see you and I hear you, I know that this is intense, and I'm with you. I'm here. I'm breathing the same air. I'm with you. And this experience, that we share of parenting, it is a connector. And I invite you to remember that you're not alone, to remember that you can begin anew in the next breath. So let's take a breath together. And I'm wishing you a beautiful week. I'm wishing you peace this week. I'm wishing you relaxation and slowing down and joy and all those wonderful things. Thank you so much for listening, my friend. Namaste.